Right, so we're joined by Zoom by Director of Accountability, Advocate Paul Hoffman, to weigh in on some of these developments. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC, Advocate Paul.
Thank you for the opportunity, Liesel, and good afternoon to your viewers.
So on the back of the meeting that was held between Parliament and Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, what's your reaction in terms of the sentiments that had been echoed, questioning how it was done rather than what was said? Parliament shook, also in shock at the sentiments uttered by the Chief Justice. How would you weigh in on the success of the meeting?
Yes, I'm afraid that Parliament has got the wrong end of the stick when it comes to the effect of the separation of powers in our constitutional dispensation. The idea of the separation of powers is to ensure that there are checks and balances on the exercise of power. So if you have, as we are supposed to have, an open, accountable and responsive form of governance, then it is perfectly in order for the Chief Justice, who happens to have been the chair of the Commission of Inquiry, to gently remind the other arms of government and the public that a year has gone by since he finalized his report and nothing has been done to implement the urgent aspects of the report, so much so that he believes that South Africa is at risk of being captured again. This is the state capture Mark II spectre hanging over our heads. And really, Parliament has known since the beginning of last year, not the middle of last year, that it is necessary to reform the criminal justice administration so as to better capacitate it to deal with serious corruption. State capture happened because there was nobody being arrested for involving themselves in the criminal activity of state capture. And it's quite clear that nothing has been done, and it's perfectly in order for the Chief Justice to remind Parliament that it's not good enough for Parliament to sit on its hands and deliberate endlessly and not get on with the business of properly implementing the judgments in the Glenister litigation, which set out very clearly what needs to be done if South Africa's anti-corruption machinery is going to work effectively and efficiently. Now, I'm afraid it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. Parliament has been caught with its pants down and is squirming and squealing in order to avoid the obvious consequences of the Chief Justice telling the world that he's not satisfied that anybody has paid any attention to the recommendations which he made and which were accepted by government.
So, in your opinion at this point, given some of the issues that had been raised, if Parliament were confronted with state capture again, do you think that it would do anything differently? I'm asking this just because we're heading closer to elections, and this is obviously a sensitive time for the democracy of South Africa at large. I also want to look at some of the reforms you alluded to within the criminal justice administration. Capacity becomes an issue. Whistleblowers who are not afforded protection is also an issue that's come to the fore. The independent directorate not being made a permanent structure. These are some of the concerns at this point. So how would you weigh in on whether they are ready?
Yes, I'm afraid what the Chief Justice said at the HSRC conference or colloquium was perfectly accurate. The Parliament is taking far too long to do anything about what needs to be done. Parliament has been sitting with draft legislation and a draft constitutional amendment prepared by Accountability Now in 2021 and delivered to Parliament in August 2021. It took Parliament, or it took the Constitutional Review Committee of Parliament, until March this year to afford us an oral hearing to speak to the amendments which we suggest. And our amendments are simply based upon the proper implementation of the criteria set in the Glenister litigation for effective and efficient anti-corruption machinery of state in South Africa. Everybody knows that these are called the STIRS criteria. We need to have specialized, trained, adequately independent, properly funded, and secure in tenure of office personnel who can get on with the job of countering the corrupt. We don't have that. We haven't had it since the Scorpions were closed down in 2009, and Parliament has done nothing about remedying the situation by passing the remedial legislation, or at least requiring the executive branch of the government to properly implement so that there is effective and efficient anti-corruption.
Advocate Hoffman, so where to from here at this point, given that Parliament's called for the spirit of cooperation rather than having one arm criticize the other? How do we begin to move forward?
If Parliament is serious about addressing the cause of state capture, the cause is that there's been no proper anti-corruption work done in South Africa for many years. So it's up to Parliament to process the type of legislation, and we don't say that we've discovered the Holy Grail or that our way of doing it is the only way to do it, but Parliament has been sitting on the draft legislation and on the draft constitutional amendment that we have suggested since August 2021, and it has done absolutely nothing apart from giving us the opportunity of making an oral representation to the Constitutional Review Committee, which has not taken the matter any further since March this year. You know, even the National Executive Committee of the ANC asked Cabinet to urgently address this situation in 2020, and that request by the NEC of the ANC has been ignored by Cabinet. Nothing has been done to implement the resolution of the NEC, which is really along the same lines as what we are suggesting. We have simply put flesh on the bones of the resolution by the ANC itself. So to say that the Chief Justice is out of order is really quite ludicrous in the circumstances, because the Chief Justice is aware of what has been going on and is alive to the fact that Parliament has done nothing to prevent state capture Mark II from happening.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, thank you for your time with us on the SABC, for weighing in on those sentiments, perhaps on the back of the meeting held between Parliament presiding officers and Chief Justice Raymond Zondo yesterday over some of the comments that had been issued by the Chief Justice at a colloquium that was held last week. National Assembly Speaker, in fact, coming out to say, refuting claims rather, that Parliament would not be able to stop another state capture from taking place. Advocate Paul Hoffman weighing in on the back of what transpired and really looking at where to from here as we continue with the work.